Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session of Wonk Week. My name is Kendall, and I am the Sales Engineer Manager at Quorum. We're going to give folks just a few more minutes to join, and then we'll get started. But in the meantime, if you're digging into that Halloween candy that you're saving for the kids, we won't judge. So come on, everybody. We'll get settled, and then we'll get started in just a few moments. All right, folks. Let's get started. Once again, my name is Kendall, and I lead our sales engineering team here at Quorum, which means I work with potential Quorum users to help them envision what their workflows could look like in Quorum's products. Today, we're here to discuss advancing your policy issues at the local level. Before we dive in, I want to share two housekeeping items. First, this session will be recorded, and the recording and slides will be distributed after the event. Second, you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen a chat box and a Q&A submission form. We encourage you to use the chat throughout the session to share your insights and submit your questions to the Q&A as you think of them. Then we'll go through the questions at the end of the presentations. And with that, we're ready to dive into content. I am really excited to be joined here today by Carmen Boone. Today, Carmen is going to use her experience working with the New York City Council to share strategies for influencing and engaging city officials. Then I'll spend a few minutes walking through strategies you can use for tracking the policy landscape when your issues crosses localities across the country. But first, let's get to know Carmen. Carmen is currently the Vice President for Public Affairs at the largest hunger relief organization in New York City, empowering people to achieve food security for good. At Food Bank, she and her team lead advocacy efforts targeting city, state, and federal elected officials by mobilizing leaders and clients from Food Bank's member community-based network, educating and activating supporters, donors, and volunteers, and working in coalition to advance shared legislative and policy priorities. Food Bank for NYC employs a government relations strategy and advocacy tactics to leverage programmatic expertise, community connection and reach, and public education and engagement to advance our anti-poverty agenda. Their tactics include community participation campaigns, civic engagements, issue updates, action alerts, and legislative meetings, which we're going to hear more about today. With over 20 years of experience creating and implementing proactive external affairs engagement strategies that have greatly helped increase awareness on government and nonprofit organizations, programs, and initiatives, Carmen is proud and honored to play a role in an everyday role in many communities in need across New York City, getting life-changing help and support. Specializing in strategic crisis and advocacy communications and public sector and nonprofit public affairs, Carmen and her team use their experience to manage large-scale and issue-based multi-platform, multicultural, and multilingual public awareness campaigns to influence policy and public opinion. Prior to Food Bank for New York City, Carmen served as Senior Director for Strategic Communications at NYC Health and Hospitals, where she led strategic external affairs for NYC Care, the largest healthcare access municipal program in the nation for people not eligible or unable to afford health insurance. She was also part of the team leading all outreach and engagement efforts for 2020 pioneering initiatives connected to the first COVID-19 surge response in the city, including testing, tracing, workforce support, and vaccination. Carmen arrived in New York City from her native Venezuela as a Fulbright scholar to pursue a Master of Arts in Media Studies at the New School. She lives with her husband Dan, son Simon, and fur daughter Callista in Verona, New Jersey. Thanks again, Carmen, for joining us, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kendall. Very excited to be here today. I believe this is the last session before everybody goes to celebrate Halloween. So let's get started with this. I put together this deck just to kind of like guide us the conversation and the experiences that I'm going to be sharing with everybody today. So I'm going to get started with these slides. In the first, I wanted to just kind of like go over the contents that I'm going to present today as part of this deck. I'll talk more about Food Bank. I know Kendall already shared some about my organization, my public affairs team or area. Also some of the pillars working with local elected officials. A case study, which is something that we do every year, which is applying for a NYC Council discretionary budget. The timeline of that budget, our budget ask, the discretionary budget process, the life outside the process, and some of the challenges that we face as part of this application every year. And I wanted to also share some kind of like scenes of our phone engagement with some of our council members as part of our media and social media work, and also in-person distributions that where we invite electeds to come and be volunteers at. And also some I wanted to share. The last thing I wanted to share was our takeaways, right? Some takeaways as part of our experience working with council members, which is many of them are going to be very familiar to all of you, because I don't think there is a lot of difference between working with electeds at the state level of the federal level, right? Just than working with council members, but we'll talk about that. And also I wanted everybody to know more about my organization. So I'm going to share the website, social media, and also how to contact my team. And then we'll have a Q&A. All right, so Food Bank for New York City, we work to feed the 1.2 million New Yorkers that are currently facing food insecurity. We do that through a network of 800 soup kitchens, food pantries, and campus partners in the 5 boroughs of the city. We not only provide food and nutrition education, but we also provide economic empowerment programs that give people tools to improve their financial wellness. The public affairs area is very small but mighty. I'll introduce you to my team members. It's like only 4 of us at Food Bank. We are currently an organization of about 300 employees, but this is the public affairs area. Is very small, but we do a lot, right? So we advocate to over 200 city, state, and federal elected officials. We do this, of course, using and working with the members, the pantry leaders, and also the clients of our member network. We also work with other different audiences, such as donors, volunteers, and we work in coalition. We are part of the several coalitions in the state of New York and the city of New York. Our strategy consists of leveraging our programmatic expertise, community connection, and also we run public education and engagement to advance our poverty fighting agenda. Our tactics include community participation efforts, civic engagement, public awareness campaigns through our website, email, media, social media, issue updates, action alerts, and also policy and legislative meetings. And, as I explained before, not only, we do this direct government relations work, we also participate in multiple coalitions and working groups. and also that includes Feeding America Advocacy Grantees Group, the Feeding New York State Advocacy Committee, and the New York City Food Consortium Policy, which includes two great organizations that we work with, City Harvest and United Way of NYC. And this is a team. Nick Bues is our Director of Government Relations. Nick has been a food bank for 15 years. He is one of the most knowledgeable food security policy people. We're very proud to have him in our team. And he leads the team. He works with Associate Director of Public Policy, Nicole Hunt. Nicole comes actually from the City Council. And Isabella Divilova is our Manager of Community Mobilization. She runs our advocacy campaigns. Isabella actually comes from our nutrition education team, which is great. She has been a food bank for 5 years, so she has great knowledge of the organization and also that important area of our work. The pillars of working with local electeds, as I mentioned, a lot of this is going to be very familiar to many of you. You have to get to know your electeds beyond their bio. So we do some work. I want to clarify, and I mentioned this to you, we don't use any tracking tools right now, any kind of a customer relation management tool. We do a lot of this, just spending a lot of hours online and doing this in a very kind of manual way. So we research our electeds' personal and professional history, campaign issues, but also additional issues they care about beyond their campaign platform, and whether they have lived experience. This is very important to know, so because we work with a lot of communities, the communities that these electeds belong to, and they have been part of that, and a lot of them have lived experience with food insecurity and hunger. We also, really have to understand their budget and legislative power, right? So what are the decisions that they make? Some of we receive a lot of city and state funding, and this is something that nonprofit organizations in the city, of course, are part of. And so we have to understand each of them's kind of participation in the budget cycle and the budget decisions of the city council or the state assembly or Senate in the case of the state electeds. Thought leadership, we really also we base our research on understanding their issue-based platforms. We treat and see every elected as a budget champion, or the possibility of becoming one. And we also try to make efforts to understand their network and their communities, and how those connect with our network and our communities, right? All right, so my case study today is, as I mentioned, the New York City Council discretionary funding. This is funding that is only available to nonprofits in the city. It's a non-competitive procurement process. It's awarded for a single fiscal year. The application process starts in January. And here's our timeline. I wanted just to go over the timeline of the city and state budget in the state and city of New York. As you see, there's an overlap of the negotiation and process of both budgets, state and city. But the state budget is generally decided in April, and then we have 2 more months to work on the city budget. The city budget is actually passed by June 30th. This is a budget deal that is made between the mayor of New York City and the council. So this is our ask, right? So there are 4 main categories in our ask. This is kind of varies every year, 4 to 6 million annually. That may not seem a lot to those working in the private sector, but it's a lot for us. It's very important funding that we receive from our council. And the first category is actually a portion of the budget that we don't really apply for, is the food pantry initiative. This is the support that the council gives to the organizations that belong to our network. Those are community-based organizations that we work with. The second category comes from our food access and benefits initiative. They give us funding for our tax prep, SNAP enrollment, and also our TEM programs. The third one is our campus pantry program. This is also via our food pantry initiative. I wanted to just talk a little bit about Campus Pantry. It's a fantastic program that We run in schools K to 12 and also in colleges. We have about 80 sites at the moment. And we allow students to come in and choose their food and other items, including hygiene items. And this is something that they do on an ongoing basis. So we have a lot of the campus pantries in colleges. They run throughout the year so that there's no interruption of that kind of service for students. So we're very proud of that. And the other category is that every individual council member has the ability to also give us funding. It's about 10,000 each. We receive some of this funding every year. For a lot of that, at the end, is for food distributions by our member agency organizations. The process, I explained that we have to apply for a good portion of this funding. We work with our institutional grants team on that. We identify priorities and opportunities to expand some of these kind of traditional categories and priorities. We prepare budget explainers for our meetings, presentations. We participate in the budget hearing. When the awards are announced, we also work with the City Council Finance team to answer questions from each council member. This is part of our work, in the allocations for each of these kind of grants for the member organizations. And then the contracting process starts. I am not going to get into this. This is not the work of our team. It's the work of our great finance team. But these are some of the steps. It's definitely one of those, complex, process of contracting. And it involves many city government agencies. And actually, the Food Pantry Initiative is administered by the Department of Youth and Community Development of the city. So we work with them a lot on that specific category of the budget. I also wanted to talk about the life outside this process, right? So some of the things that we have been doing, as I said, just kind of like labor of love. We don't really have a lot of tools as a nonprofit organization, but we really kind of try to use the media ecosystem. As you know, all electeds these days are very savvy on social media. They create their content, they respond to constituents live. They record themselves, just kind of like with a lot of this messaging. So we try to monitor this environment, and when there's alignment, we celebrate that. We let them know, we validate what they're saying. We make sure that every budget win, we cheer and thank them. This is something that we try to do on a consistent basis. And also we try to participate, identify opportunities for press engagement, press releases, statements, op-eds. The second category here is events. We have been trying to join budget events, such as the State of the Cities, State of the Boroughs, State of the District speech, given by the remarks and the events given by all the different actors of the budget cycle. And we have been also identifying panel discussions that feature our council members. So we are there, we support them and all of that. We are also trying to organize our, post-COVID, our policy events too, panel discussions, legislative breakfasts, and roundtables connected to the legislative and the budget cycles, right? And last but not least, our advocacy efforts. This is everything I'm sure everybody has been talking about. Unfortunately, I couldn't join the earlier events today, but or the discussions today. But email and text action alerts, right, to mobilize our member network. We have been doing more tabling. This is very important to us for our kind of like grassroots efforts, creating specific collateral for some of these budget campaigns, right, to educate people on our issues. And we have been redesigning our advocacy page on the website of the organization, and also adding more modules and making it more user-friendly. And we have been doing also some paid social media to educate people on our main priorities as part of the budget cycle. All right, some challenges. We have many. I'm just going to go over these four. We have some competition, of course. Coalition work is rewarding and it's necessary, but it's also hard. All of this depends on the budget year we are in, and the budget deals and priorities of the mayor and the council. So we are in that kind of like huge ecosystem of priorities and assessments of what what's needed, right? The two groups, and the discretionary contracting process is difficult for our teams. It's always delayed, so our organization has to work all the different kind of like issues, but also has to advance some budget, right, to be able to meet the priorities of our member network. And of course, we follow a reimbursement process and all of that, but it's not ideal. And then I wanted to also mention again, we have limited capacity as a team. We're four because of lack of access to tracking, and just is more kind of seeing everything in one place. Customer relationship management tools, and also consultancies. We don't use any kind of lobby firm or political consultant at the moment. So this is all done in-house. And I just wanted to show, as I mentioned before, some fun scenes of our work with some council members. We invite them to our food distributions. Very important for us. Our Thanksgiving distributions. We had a great number of electeds coming last year. We're hoping for the same this year. We see here Brooklyn Council member Sandy Norris pictured with our CEO, Leslie Gordon. We have Manhattan Council member Eric Butcher. We did with him a tax prep pop-up in his office. And here's a video that he recorded, or his team recorded, with a constituent that was using those services that day. Here's an op-ed by our CEO, Leslie Gordon, with the chair of the Council Welfare Committee and Bronx Council member Diana Ayala. This is not connected to the budget, but it's about the SNAP, the pandemic era SNAP ending earlier this year in March. And we were able to place an op-ed with her, which is a major milestone for our team in terms of policy communications. Additionally, more distributions. We have here a Bronx Council member, Amanda Farias, and the board president, Vanessa Gibson. This was an important distribution that we did last year at a public housing complex. And we also had very recently Brooklyn Council member, Crystal Hudson. She was our College Food Security Summit. Also another milestone. We had several council members coming, or electeds in general, to come in and speaking and participating in some of the panel discussions that we had there. Okay, some takeaways. Again, I'm not reinventing the wheel. A lot of this is based on, there's a lot of common sense here. We also take the time to train ourselves, join events like this one, and also hear from our sister organizations, our partners, about best practices. So this is all reflected here. So I just kind of wanted to go, over some of them. Take the time to get to know every elected you're working with beyond their bio, right? Create and know your policy communications game plan. I know there was a great policy communications presentation earlier in the program today. I'm gonna make sure to listen to that recording. Take every budget cycle to educate your electeds, their team. Very important to work with the team and their constituents about your issues at large. Identify budget champions. Let them know that they're champions. Sometimes they don't know, and also cultivate them. And celebrate every win, budget win, via emails, social media, website, press statements. And the last kind of like slide here is to set expectations internally, right? I wanted to make we are a nonprofit organization. We have limitations in terms of resources, our own capacity. The size of the team is not big. So we just, it's very important to set expectations with the leadership of your organization. I think this is important to kind of like you really have that foundation as part of your work. If you do have a budget to work with a lobbyist or, to get tracking tools, you have to be very clear also about what your constraints are and your needs and what those resources can help you achieve. This is something that, we struggle with sometimes, what is exactly what we need this for. And also be receptive to feedback from electeds and their teams in every budget meeting. Have a good argument. Be willing to adapt messaging wise. This is something that we have also learned, throughout the way. Thank you for attending. I wanted to share the website of Food Bank here and also our advocacy page, our social media handle, and then also our email to contact our team if anybody has extra questions after this session today. And let's do the Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Carmen. If I could just have you pause your screen sharing, I'll take over the screen sharing from here.
Okay, here we are.
Awesome. Well, that was absolutely wonderful. I was taking notes the whole time. I feel like I learned a lot about how to engage with local electeds. Before we hop to Q&A, I'm going to go ahead and take us through kind of like a high-level presentation about how to track local policy and how to stay in tune with the landscape. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Looks like we are good to go. So to dive into how to track local policies, you need to know where to deploy the engagement strategies Carmen just discussed. Thinking about this, we often talk about how at the state level, it's hard to track all the movement without software because there are 50 different legislatures working at a different pace with different priorities and different processes. But at the local level, that problem is multiplied by 1,000. This is just a small sampling of what different city websites can look like. To search each of these to find out if your issue is in the conversation is nearly impossible. So instead, let's talk about the 4 tools any local government affairs professional needs in their toolbox to track the local landscape. 1, social media monitoring. 2, agenda and minute tracking. 3, news monitoring. And 4, a database to log interactions with officials. Social media monitoring is creating a system that alerts you when your organization or issue is mentioned across social platforms like Twitter or X, now that we're calling it X, or Facebook. This has a few key benefits. First, it acts as an early warning system. Officials will often head to social media to talk about what's coming up in their cities before the official paper trail of policymaking comes out. Second, the way someone messages a social post allows you to get insight into their stance on the issue. You might look at their hashtags that they're using or the accounts they're retweeting to see where they align. Finally, social media monitoring can show you how much momentum an issue actually has. Is the full city council tweeting about it, or is it just one member? With a system like Quorum Local, you can get alerts just like this via email or push notification like you see here. Agendas and minutes are the most formal types of documentation of what policy is moving at the local level. While these can be delivered on a short notice and, of course, hard to react to quickly, they can show the level of urgency you need to react to an issue with. Additionally, if your issues involve children or social issues, you'll want to add school board agenda monitoring to your toolkit. The third information source that we believe can help local tracking is news. News stands out as it helps understand the public's perception and stance on an issue. Like social media, the news will give more color to the issue that you can use to aid in your messaging strategy. But at the same time, you can look towards the sources quoted and find potential advocates, allies, or threats to advancing your stance. Lastly, interaction logging is the best way to organize your team's institutional knowledge and use it to build your plan to influence the policy landscape. With a stakeholder engagement tool like Quorum, your team can log interactions with local officials and save notes about what was discussed, even forward emails that get automatically logged into the system. Then, when you're planning your strategy, you can use those notes, whether it's over a course of a quarter, a year, or 5 years, to determine the next best course of action. go ahead and pause my screen sharing there because we have officially reached the Q&A session of this Q&A session as a part of this panel. So I'm going to hop on over to Q&A. Carmen, thank you again for your wonderful presentation. We do have a question here from the chat. What are some tactics to get local officials to take quick action on a campaign without overwhelming them with information?
We have been trying to build toolkits. This is something that is in our to-do list, which is kind of toolkits specific to our electeds and their teams that they can use just really and share, the messaging and the assets very quickly. Without compromising some of of course the different types of agendas and issues they support or not. It's just kind of like really general kind of like messaging, anti-hunger, just just kind of food security thinking, and that goes into like building these toolkits. This is something that we have been trying to do, and I think that's the best way to do that. The other thing is that, of course, I mean, this is something I have been doing throughout my career as somebody that came from the local, the city government. My background is mainly on strategic communications, and then of course I worked very closely throughout my time there with the government relations teams and the different agencies, and also in the mayor's office, and just really perfecting your policy communications game in terms of like really like how to really communicate these very complex issues to people that don't really have time, but also that sound very compelling and that have a lot of kind of like action oriented type of content, right? So I think the best way definitely is to do that and to build toolkits and just have them flexible toolkits that you can adapt to each campaign and each kind of like budget ask.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. What I heard there is like almost being prepared with the toolkit, or at least like the template of the toolkit, so that when it becomes a quick rapid response moment, your team is ready to go and you're approaching it from like a cool, calm, and collected perspective, and that doesn't come out in your ask to the elected when you are hoping to increase attention, awareness, or even monetary funds.
And I wanted to also add something is that storytelling is so important these days, right? So it's not only kind of like to approach our electeds with stats, and which are super important too, but also with stories from our clients, the people like, served by all these different programs that we have, which is something that the electeds always ask. But before they ask, I think it's important that we have a few set of stories ready for them.
Yeah. When you're doing that storytelling, and I promise I'll get to the other questions, but I had a follow-up for you. When you're doing that storytelling, do you find that it's helpful to make that connection between the elected's, area of representation, whether it's a borough or kind of a larger area, to the person whose story you're telling? Or do you think that generalized stories are okay?
I mean, it depends on what you have available, honestly. Like, it just, as somebody who has worked again in strategic communications so much, and also like working with the media directly, answering press inquiries, and just finding stories is hard, and finding the right stories. So you really have to carve out time to build your story bank, and also like create categories. In the case of New York City, per borough, if you can, per district, right? So then when an elected comes from an area, you have a few stories that you have collected from community-based organizations that they are very familiar with, because
Right.
they work directly with all of them.
That makes a lot of sense. And of course, I think it helps. One of the things you stressed in your presentation was the importance of cultivating relationships and not just reaching out to electeds when you need something, right? So that's kind of like the underlying foundation underneath these, fruitful relationships with local electeds, is having a two-way street, asking for feedback, and of course, inviting them to be a part of your efforts and community as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. We have another good question here. We know that with state engagement, that the involvement of staff can vary from state to state. Can you discuss a little how city staff are involved in your work in New York City?
City government staff.
Yes.
Well, there are two. Of course, there is the city elected staff, and also the city government agency staff, right? Which is two areas that of relationship that you have to cultivate, because they run the programs and the programs that we operate at food banks. Some of the SNAP enrollment. We have great relationships with the Department of Social Services of the city, which is the biggest kind of like municipal social services of the nation because of the number of people that they serve in a city like New York. And then like of course it's like there is a lot of rotation, right, of staff, so you have to really keep it's definitely some work to just kind of like keep your roster of contacts in every entity in city government updated. We struggle with that. We are at the moment kind of like finding a way to just really organize our contacts and really not only like just kind of having names and last names and also, but as I said, just kind of like getting to know people and setting up meetings and meet and greets, which is something that it's like like sometimes of course the day-to-day work takes over, and it's very hard to set up this kind of like check-ins with some of these staff to just give them updates about your work. So just kind of finding ways to do that is challenging, but it needs to happen so that you can really pursue your budget priorities and some of you just kind of like really respond to the needs of your member network, as in the case of food bank.
Yeah. Do you find that city staff are more inclined to kind of be a part of, coming to an event or joining you all for a community effort in comparison to electeds, or do they normally attend together?
They attend together. That's my experience. Although you may see some of the staff of our electeds are very engaged and very involved in a variety of events and activations. But most of the time you see them together, which is great because you have the opportunity to interact with the elected and the staff, right? Which is of course is part of this kind of ecosystem that you need to pursue your priorities and your different types of asks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a great question here. It's asking for your advice, specifically, what advice you might have for a federal advocacy and policy team for how they can build relationships at the state and local level and with state and local groups that are doing critical advocacy work at that level that maybe they're just not that familiar with yet.
I think it's so important to try to build time in your kind of like as part of your kind of annual kind of plans and activities to come to where the local kind of like community and really try to I advise and this is something we are also trying to do, the government relations team at food bank, to volunteer with some of the, if this is nonprofit work, for instance, to volunteer with our own organization, so that we get to know the different kind of like stages and the different types of work that we do, and we interact not only with our frontline workers but also with the clients served by them, right? And of course our the work that we do is not really on the ground, but this is something that we're trying to do right now. So I seriously advise to really like try to kind of like come to the community, set up meet and greets, and also get to so that you have also this type of listening listening sessions where you kind of like get to know the clients served. But I'm not sure exactly what is the topic of the specific the person and the issues of this group. But I would seriously advise to really get away from what you find online and just kind of try to have that experience a few times a year.
Yeah. It's almost like no matter the industry, if you're looking to build bridges with folks who do the work at a different level of government than your org, you have to lead with the human relationships with the community. That's
Mhm.
what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, that applies to, like, every sector, private sector, and it's the same. It's just kind of like, how the work that the specific corporation company is doing that connects with the community at the kind of basic levels, right? So just really try to make that connection. I think it's super important to understand that. And yeah, again, I mean, another way to do this is just really know where the electeds are. Just really, like, like, build a calendar of activities that the elected is involved with, and just kind of like follow them. Just kind of like see what they are doing. If you have, build a list of electeds that you want to follow and you want to get to know more at the local level, and work with their teams to identify those events and make connect with your area and your issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That actually reminds me of something that you said early on in your presentation. You mentioned that every elected is a potential champion. And I wrote that down. It was the first thing I wrote down. It actually reminds me of something I was talking about with my team today. Um, and, I'm curious, what do you need? Like, that's not always the case, right? Sometimes, like, there are electeds who have a history of maybe not being aligned with your own initiatives, or maybe they've, voted against particular things that, your organization is fighting for. But what I'm hearing from you is that you have to approach each of these relationships um, with a fresh hope that, something can come of the relationship, and that it's less about the differences and more about the similarities. Can you speak a
Yeah.
little bit more to what kind of that philosophy means to your team about, every elected being a potential champion?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the hardest but the most rewarding a part of the job, when you kind of approach a seemingly antagonistic elected, right, on some of these issues. I have to say, an organization like us, I think there's a lot of unity in terms of addressing the very important issue of hunger in our communities.
Mhm.
So most of the time you have an agreement on a lot of the basic kind of like asks and issues, and of course there are opposition on some others that entail, of course, expansion of programs. I mean, we have right now at the federal level the farm bill reauthorization.
Yeah.
Many of us were in Washington, D.C. very recently, which is very nice. Kind of like just that connection with, again, it's the opposite of, like, we go to the federal kind of like setting, with the local kind of like, teams. And we had a great opportunity there. Of course, most of the electeds that we connected with as part of our congressional delegation are very friendly to our issues, but we also had conversations with the staff, or some others are not. And I think it's a lot of baby steps, like, to just kind of like achieve what you want with those electeds. And at the end of the day, everybody has the opportunity to champion something in your priorities, right?
Mhm.
So just kind of like, that is kind of like my principle. Is just kind of like, there's definitely, if you kind of really have a good messaging and a good argument, I think you can actually bring everybody around and in the case of us, of course, this is not a hard selling, but we do have opposition in many of our priorities that we advocate for.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Another question here, which I think I'll, kind of expand upon. We have someone who wants to know how engaged your organization is with national food banks, but I'm also curious if you could speak a little bit to your coalition building efforts at the local, state, and national level.
Yeah, so Food Bank for New York City is part of Feeding America, which is the largest, of course, network of food banks nationally. I believe it's over 200 food banks. We had the opportunity to meet many of them as part of the Farm Bill fly-in Washington, D.C. in September. But we work with them. We're part of the advocacy grantees group of Feeding America. And across food bank, many food bankers have worked and are part of groups that are led by Feed in America in other areas, programs, of course, member network. In the specifically, our team belongs to the advocacy and government relations, of course, groups. So we, we try to kind of like, there are regular meetings, regular kind of like webinars, and people have the opportunity to do also like there's Q&As. There's an opportunity to really look at best practices and also adopt some of those kind of like great experiences that others have at their food banks. We are right now doing a lot of strategic work at food bank, and we are looking what other food banks are doing in some areas, so we can replicate those kind of like best practices instead of kind of reinventing the wheel. So is the work with other food banks is deep. Our CEO is also has a long history, experience in this area, and she interacts and meets with many of them. In terms of coalition building, we also belong to the New York City, New York State, which is also a great group of food banks of both the regional kind of like state of New York. They were also in Washington D.C. We meet with them regularly. We are right now working on our state budget priorities, right, as part of the coalition, which is work that we do with the coalition all the time. And then also, we belong to many other groups. We're always exploring and expanding our participation in coalition in groups. Right now we're exploring in areas like food as medicine, for instance, which is, is a movement that is happening nationally. And also financial empowerment, right? So it's this work that is happening in our organization. There's a lot of coalition happening there, coalition work happening there. So we're eager to belong to things like that, but we belong to, and also we have great work happening with our sister organizations, United Way and City Harvest, very active also. Everything we do in many areas and everything you see on social media, this is a joint effort with those two main groups in New York City.
That's awesome. Strong coalitions. We love to hear it. As a former coalition member for my prior employment in the anti-sexual violence space, I love to hear about strong coalitions, especially working to kind of move us forward and help get people the resources that they need. Well, my last question for you is, are you going to dress up for Halloween? And if so, what is your costume?
I haven't thought of it, but I have maybe half an hour before before I get out. We do have some kids coming here. My husband is outside trick-or-treating with them. I haven't decided. I have a teenager. They just don't plan their costume anymore. I don't know. At least not mine. So so we'll see what we do here in the next hour or two.
Yes, I love to hear it.
Question. I love when my son was younger. I definitely enjoyed that, and I feel very nostalgic to see the pictures of little kids, and that I don't have that kind of like excitement, leading to Halloween.
Yeah, my niece is she's 2 and she's a tiny black cat today, which is so cute. I might have to drive over just to give her a piece of candy because it's so sweet.
It's so sweet.
Yeah. But I, like you, also don't have a costume, and I'm sure that there's plenty of
I need to be. When I was younger, I was more involved in creating that, and I don't know. I've become a more boring person talking about government relations on Halloween.
You know what? Hopefully, the insights that you shared today didn't spook anybody. They didn't give anyone a fright. They just helped folks know a little bit more about what it makes to build a winning local government affairs strategy. So, thank you so much for joining us today. Your insights
Thank you
were
so much
invaluable.
for having me.
Yeah, I wrote some down. It sounds like from the chat, people have really enjoyed it. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you to our audience for tagging along on this Tuesday afternoon, and happy Halloween.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.